Okay, that's it. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the London Green Party hustings for the MEP elections. Oh.
It's 2:15, and so we have a very, very packed agenda, and we need to get going with our MEP hustings. And it is an absolute pleasure to have so many candidates here today. There are 3 candidates who have sent their apologies. We have apologies from Scott Ainsley, from Eleanor Margulies, and also from Cullen Walsh. I believe all of them are working today. We are holding these hustings because the whole situation with EU exit is an absolute, unimaginable constitutional chaos. And it seems we should be ready to hold EU elections, and in particular because even if those elections do not happen, it makes absolutely plain to people that level of democracy that we're losing if we leave the EU. So, the way this is going to work, I'm Caroline Russell, I'm a Green London Assembly member, and I'm chairing. Phil, who is the ERO, Electoral Returning Officer, is going to be holding his iPad up with timings for everyone, so that you know how much longer you have to speak. We are going to have to be very strict on timings. We are going to have 2-minute opening statements from each candidate. 2 of the candidates who are not here have given me statements, which I will read out. And we will do it in the order of the candidates as you are listed at random on the website, which shows all the candidates. So just so you know, it will be, I will actually read Scott Ainsley's statement first, then it'll be Obi, then it'll be, I'll read Eleanor's, and then we'll go straight through all the rest of the candidates so you know what's happening. We will then have, after the opening statements, 2 minutes per candidate. We will then have the first round of questions, and we have 3 questions, which I will read out, and I suggest candidates write down what the questions are. We will, for the first round of questions, we will go from me, so from Sam to Shara, and then from Rachel to Obi. For the second round of questions, we will go from Rachel to Obi and from Sam to Shara. And then for the third thing, which is the closing statements, we'll start at Shara's end and go through that way. So what I've tried to do is mix it up, but I'm afraid there are too many of you for me to completely randomise it. My head would explode. So I've tried to just mix it up as much as I can. So, we are off. Have you got anything? No? I believe this has been live streamed, and the other thing is if you are tweeting, please use #GreenMEP. So, I'm going to start by reading Scott Ainsley's statement. You'll have to imagine Scott here before you with all his energy. So, here goes. The Tory divisions over Europe have been played out in government. Several years of effort and resources focused on Brexit, and it's failing. I hope our country finally confines this party, UKIP, and the likes to the history books. Meanwhile, the Labour Party have sat on the fence for far too long and dithered and delayed. Let's call time on these divided parties and the electoral system that sustains them. They are all no longer fit for purpose. I am proud of our Green Party membership who ensured that in the 2015 general election we were the only party to stand on an anti-austerity platform exposing the lack of political will of the Labour Party to oppose the Tory spending cuts. And for the referendum in 2016, Greens were pro-migration and supported the continuation of freedom of movement when all other parties pandered to UKIP and the far right. With only 11 years left to avoid climate chaos, we need to get a move on and afford the climate emergency at least the same amount of effort, focus and resources given to Brexit. We need robust and steadfast politicians to deliver on climate action. The Greens I have met across the country are open, honest and generous people who care deeply about the planet and the most vulnerable in society, and they are getting on with making the world a more sustainable and fairer place. I thrive off working with others and have fought and won many successful campaigns. Together with Lambeth Greens, I won the first ever election I stood in, wiping out the Lib Dems. I then went on not only to secure a second term, but we replaced the Tories as the main opposition on the council and became the biggest Green group of councillors in London. The people of Lambeth are waking up to a credible alternative. This is due to the commitment and talents of many Green Party members everywhere, and also the stand I took as the lone Green councillor from 2014 to 2018 in helping community groups who have fought to save their homes, libraries, green spaces and local services. I've also supported those who seek redress for neglect, injustice and child abuse. And together with the People's Audit, I've helped follow the money and shine a spotlight on wasted corporate millions that could be supporting frontline services. Please have a look at my website, watch my 2 short videos, read about my priorities for London and find out more about why I'm the right person to represent Londoners as the Green MEP and take on and build on the great work that Jean Lambert has done. Vote for a robust, strong and successful campaigner who thrives on working with others and who has a proven track record of getting things done and getting good results. I'm a likeable yet strong negotiator who doesn't take any bullshit. So that's Scott. I suspect it may have gone over his 2 minutes, but because the 2 candidates who are absent are not here and they're not going to get to answer questions, I've given them that leeway. Their statements are about the same length. Obi, your 2-minute statement.
Okay, hello, my name is Obi, that's Raymond of the Den Show. So I've actually used my website from YouTube, which is Occupy News Network. I came to Occupy London via the Occupy London movement, now a network. Got arrested twice. Once when it was an it was actually Save the Badges demo, turned into an anti-BNP demo. Second time was actually in Occupy Democracy with Baroness Jenny Jones, where she got arrested because apparently she was loitering or something. But in any case, actually, I like the fact that when Caroline Lucas was with us in Bolcom, she got arrested. I thought, hey, these are actually the people that I want to join. So I joined 2015. I've always voted Green Party, although I only joined during the Green Surge. However, it's like there's so many things actually wrong with the UK at the moment, with our society. Fascism is actually rising. Shock doctrine all over the world because of the fact that climate change is happening. Movement from Africa to Europe is because of the fact that people can't feed themselves because of the droughts that are actually happening. So we need to solve these things now. And unfortunately, we need the EU to do this because as the UK alone, we can't do that. That's actually my main point, really. We need the EU, no matter how neoliberal it is. The Tories actually want to leave because it's not neoliberal enough for them. So we have to work with what we have, and that is actually the EU. So hopefully we can reform it to a better society, better Europe. Thank you.
I'm now going to read a statement from Eleanor Margulies, who is at work this afternoon. I'm really sorry that I can't be with you this afternoon. I'm just down the road at the Globe Theatre, where I'll be describing costumes, sets, rude gestures and sword fights for blind and partially sighted people. Normally, I'd be able to swap with a colleague, but Saturday the 16th of March is Disabled Access Day. There are inclusive events in practically every London theatre and museum, which is great, but it means everyone I know is working today, so I just couldn't get away. I'm also sorry because I really enjoy taking part in Hustings, well, most of the time. I like hearing unfamiliar views and experiences, thinking on my feet, and having an opportunity to put across Green Party policies to non-members who might be hearing about the 4-day week or basic income for the first time. Last April, as co-chair of Southwark Green Party, I spoke alongside other party leaders at a Hustings in Southwark Cathedral, a beautiful, rather intimidating location. So why do I think I will make a good MEP? The current Green MEPs have an amazing reputation for hard work, detailed scrutiny of legislation, and researching and writing reports that lead to action. For example, Sean Berry has said that a report called Hot Houses, produced by Green MEPs, fed directly into current London Assembly policy to insulate homes properly. My background in research and writing means I have the skills and the tenacity to make technical information understandable and to show how it relates to everyday life. I'm writing this on Friday the 15th of March as images of school strikers are flooding in, not just in capital cities, but in more than 2,000 places across the world. It's the duty of elected politicians to respond to the call from the students for rapid and genuine action on climate change. I'm looking to the European Parliament to do that, to avert catastrophic climate breakdown and tackle the power of the planet-eating monster corporations. We need to work together. We know what we need to do: ban fracking and coal mining, invest in solar and wind instead, no new runways, affordable long-distance trains instead, ban toxic diesel and replace it with electric buses, cargo bikes, cycle networks, and walkable tree-lined streets. For London, this investment would mean creating thousands of green new jobs, insulating drafty homes and installing solar panels on every block of council flats, for starters. As a campaigner on air pollution, cycling and social housing, I've been inspired by seeing good ideas in action in cities across Europe and have brought them into the conversation in the UK. I promise to work hard in the coming months to tell the story of the EU's successes and to show why we need greens in the room. Please make me your first choice for the list. And that was from Eleanor Martins. So we now move on to the next candidate, who is Kirsten de Keyser.
Hello. Are you ready for one of those irritating team building exercises? No? Not surprised. So, perhaps we'll just do a metaphorical one then. Picture one of those fancy colouring books, you know, those ones that were popular a few years back with teeny-weeny segments that you had to carefully colour in with multitude of coloured pens scattered all over your kitchen table. Now, instead picture a giant mural which has to be completed by armies of graffiti artists with suitcases full of spray cans. Now, the colouring book is complex and beautiful when it's properly coloured in, but the most vibrant murals are the work of many. So if you want to join in, how do you make your mark? How do you make yourself stand out? Here's how. You locate a bunch of like-minded artists and you join in with their particular theme. A beautiful garden, a striking cityscape, existing chapel, if that's what you takes your fancy. And then you pick a unique image, something you are really expert at, and which will make everyone else's work even better, including yours, of course. And that's the result. So where am I going with this? How does this connect with what we're doing today with Brussels and the EU and the MEPs? Well, it's like this. Our usual stamping ground is here in London, and that's the colouring book. Brussels and the other 27 member states are Europe. Together they are very, very big, and we are very, very small. Therefore, the work of an MEP is vastly different from that of the local politician. And that's what the majority of our British MEPs never got. But what Caroline, Jean, Molly and Keith have become such expert at. Being an MEP is about being a diplomat, with all their quiet backroom cunning. And it's about being a politician, relentlessly pushing for equalities, forging, supporting relationships. And the trick is getting that balance right. Thank you very much.
All of you can keep an eye on the clock ticking down so that you can wind yourselves up if possible within 1 or 2 minutes. Darren Moore, I invite you to give your opening statement.
Hi, I'm Darren Moore, and with our planet sending us loud and distress signals almost daily, there's never been a more urgent time for working together to transform society to meet our climate emergency. Given what we've seen with our air pollution crisis and the number of court cases against the government, there's just no way the UK can address its environmental concerns alone. The current government clearly can't be trusted. If humanity is going to overcome its greatest challenge to date, it's essential we all work together, and most especially work very closely with our nearest neighbours. I intend to do everything possible to keep this European project together for the greater good of humanity, and that might mean marketing it better, marketing its benefits better, reforming it, but also examining our divisions and tackling inequality in society that has led to such feelings of distrust across the country. A little bit about me. I'm a trained earth scientist in geology and geophysics, so I've got a deep understanding of the Earth's processes and environmental science. I've seen the effects on species of previous mass extinction events in geological time. And although I'm sure all the Green Party members in the room understand our climate breakdown, it's surprising how few members of the public know that today we're losing species at the same rate as when the dinosaurs went extinct 200 million years ago. Maybe also unusually, I'm a business owner in London. By day I run a boutique marketing company in Chiswick, enjoying the benefits of living and working locally, cycling through many of Ealing's green parks. My job running the company involves helping local, national and European businesses and charities understand the UK market, and therefore I understand how to make persuasive arguments that resonate with many people across the nation. I'm a committed local Green Party activist in Ealing, bringing energy and enthusiasm to our campaign throughout the year. And in fact, when I stood for the local elections last year, I received the greatest number of votes we've ever received in Ealing, thanks to the team. So my message is of hope and to dream of making London, the United Kingdom and Europe not only a better place to live and work, but one that comes together to halt the upcoming climate catastrophe. We're not done yet.
Thank you very much. And now we'll hear from Remco van der Stoep. Is that how you pronounce it?
Dear Green friends, thank you for being here. My name is Remco van der Stoep, and I am standing to represent you in the European Parliament. This is actually the first time that I am standing for office in a way like this, and it's also the only office that I am standing for. Throughout the last 15 years, I have been politically active across Europe in the Green movement, and especially in the European Green Party. And the way that I want to make myself a politician is by becoming an MEP for the Green Party, especially for the London Green Party. 3 years ago, I was campaigning, like many of you, for Remain in the referendum. And I still believe that we ought to remain members of the EU. And that is very much why we are all gathered here and why we're sitting at this table and still believing that we are going to get an election for the European Parliament. For the London region, for the Green Party, I was the person coordinating as a volunteer the Greens for a Better Europe campaign. That went reasonably well. The Remain vote in London was high, but unfortunately the rest of the country didn't follow suit, and we left. Well, we didn't leave the European Union, but we had a majority for leave. And the extension that is now ahead of us gives us an opportunity to continue to campaign for and to secure a people's vote and a citizens' assembly. And if it's up to me, both the citizens' assembly and the people's vote. And we mustn't have the illusion that if we win the people's vote by, say, 52 to 48, that suddenly all of the problems have disappeared. We need to really transform our society, and we need to do that in dialogue with everyone, whether they vote to Remain or vote to leave. I'm a European, I'm a Londoner, I'm a migrant, I'm a campaigner, and I'm a deeply dedicated Green. And I will stand for our beliefs, I will stand for our achievements, I'll stand for our EU membership, and I'll stand for the survival of our species. Please vote for me as your number one and number two. Thank you very much.
And now we're going to hear from Rachel Collinson.
Hi everybody.
Hi.
The last 2 decades I've been campaigning, and they've taught me that how to push the levers of power and which ones specifically to choose. And for me, you have to follow the money. We have a climate emergency that is such that we have to change tack. The methods we've used up until this point have been good, but they're not enough. So it's my plan to essentially frack the heart of capitalism. Not actual fracking. to tear apart the banks and replace the financial system with something new and better. And the big problem I have with Europe is that it's run by financial institutions and banks. As Obi said, it's still neoliberal. And so if I go in, what I want to do is tackle that, is really get right to the heart of capitalism, because if there was no capitalism, there would be no climate change. So we have this urgency. We need to tell better stories. And the green wave that's coming across Europe, and it will come to the UK, is telling a story, instead of despair, fear and hate, like the Remain campaign, it's telling a story of hope, of courage and of love. Now, part of doing that is listening, mediation, finding common ground, and that's what I'm all about. I want to be a politician who listens first. Now, we have some fantastic candidates here, and it's a really difficult choice, and that's something I'm so proud of. Well done, Greens, for nominating these fantastic folks. But this, if I'm elected, my sole focus will be on Europe. This is the only election I'm standing in this year. I'm no longer in my business spokesperson role, and I hope you'll put me number one.
The live stream on, this is a good idea. Sorry. The live stream, you need to think where the camera is facing. Okay, so I hope for those who are watching the live stream, you're not feeling too seasick. You should be stable for a bit. So we're now going to hear from Sam Murray.
30 weeks ago, Greta Thunberg sat up in front of the Swedish Parliament to protest inaction on climate change. Yesterday, over 1.4 million young people, myself included, took part in protests for climate action. Right now, young people across Europe need hope. They need representation, and they need action. I truly believe that the European Green Party has a platform radical enough to give young people answers. I want to be an MEP to empower young people to take action within their communities, to work across generations, to fight climate change, to fight poverty, and ban discriminatory youth wages. I want to fight for a fairer migration and asylum system that puts the human at the heart. We are talking about people and not numbers. I also want to draw on my 6 years' experience working in cultural policy to bring cultural policy to the heart of Europe, to bring cultures together, to share identities and to forge new traditions and to really define what it means to be European. In terms of my experience, I currently sit on the board of the Federation of Young European Greens, and I've helped our contributions towards the European Green Manifesto. I have also previously been the co-chair of the Young Greens of England and Wales, working with so many inspiring activists of all different ages. I want to be your MEP to fight for our Europe, to fight for young people, and to fight for the common good.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to hear from Vivian Lichtenstein.
Hi. I'm so proud to be a member of the Green Party and to be amongst this great group of people here. Up until this year, in all my work in the party, in all my campaigning for peace and human rights regarding Israel-Palestine, both within the Jewish community and the wider UK community, I didn't bring up my family history or my own experiences of anti-Semitism, unless the issue had already been raised by someone else. So why is it different now from before? Because now we are living in dangerous times. Now we are seeing the rise in the far right. Why? because of austerity and rising inequality, leading to scapegoating and xenophobia. And we all know where that leads. Why is it important to have someone like me representing London in the European Parliament? Because state members of the EU are increasingly joining the far-right movements gaining force around the world. They need reminding where scapegoating and xenophobia lead to. The far-right movements gaining power is hardly conducive to democracy, and that's what we need to fight climate change and protect the environment. They're hardly conducive to human rights, and that's what we need for migrants and refugees. Let me stress that Germany has been a light unto nations, admitting, apologising, educating and making reparations, and especially having taken in 1 million refugees. And I find that just, really moving. Aside from moralising within the EU, being a massive trading bloc, should be stricter in enforcing human rights clauses in trade agreements. Thank you.
And we're now going to hear from Peter Underwood.
Good afternoon. Before my work in party politics, I worked in politics as an assistant director in the civil service. And it was a few years ago when I was sat in Brussels. It was a conference organised by the European Commission to talk about how our respective countries were doing in improving renewable energy, which we were doing at the time. There were a group of us sat in a restaurant in the evening, chatting, joking away about the silly stories we'd heard about renewable energy in the press. And it first struck me that this is the place I want to work. I would open the restaurant, it's the European Union. It was fascinating to hear the different stories from across Europe, the different experiences, that we were all working together for the same thing. We were sharing our experiences, passing on advice about what had worked for us, and talking through problems that we all faced and how we might tackle them. This wasn't nations competing with each other. These were people cooperating with each other to try and make the world a better place, to try and improve the world. That's why I'm so passionate about the European Union. The European Union can be a powerful force for good. It isn't always, unfortunately, we know that. We have to reform the European Union, but that's what it can do, and that's what we should be working for. But it's also why I joined the Green Party when I moved into party politics. I believe our cooperative, collaborative approach to politics is the best way forward. It's about bringing those diverse voices together and working together to achieve what we need and rapidly achieve it given the climate emergency. These are the messages I think that will be crucial for us in the European election, together in this country and across Europe, and that's how I think we're going to win over more voters in the upcoming elections. That's why I'm standing to be one of our... I hope you'll put me at the top of your list of candidates for these elections. Thank you.
And we're now going to hear from Gulna Hasnain.
Hello, I'm Gulna Hasnain, to be your lead candidate for the MEP London list. It's very difficult to predict what's going to happen on the 29th of March, but what we do know is that it's a mess. This is a Brexit shambles, and politics has never been at its most tribal, at its most petty. And Brexit has really driven the worst instincts of our people, of British politics. Factionalism, deceit, blatant lying. It just seems that few politicians have our best interests at heart. And whatever happens, we need to be the voice of reason and continue to fight for all our citizens. The far right is galvanising, and it has never been so important that we work together against the poison of these hate mongers. As the Green Party, we have an opportunity now to advance a very positive Remain message, a message that is radical, inclusive, and stands in solidarity with refugees and migrants. It's a message that few others are advancing. But the challenge that is most urgent, climate change, it will not be solved in isolation. We need to be working together within the EU, with the EU, within the EU, to make sure that our environmental commitments and protections are not diluted, that our environmental and food standards are driven to a higher level and not to the lowest common denominator of the US standards. During my time at City Hall, I worked on projects that benefited from significant funding from EU, such as the ESF, ERDF and Jessica funding, and for projects that delivered green skills, green jobs and green infrastructure. It was only after reading this book, The Greens for a Better Europe, that I actually appreciated the role that Jean Lambert has played in bringing that funding for us, green funding in London, so investment in London. So we inherit a legacy of hard work, so that is why I would like to stand, fight to remain, and rejoin if necessary. So that's me. Vote for me, you're number one.
And finally on this round, we're going to hear from Shara Ali.
Thanks very much. Shara Ali, hoping and standing to be lead candidate for the European Parliament for London. I want to say a little bit about my experience, and then I'll go on to say about the topics that really motivate me, and I hope all of us as Greens. Firstly, I joined the Green Party some 17 years ago, 2002, and it was after a little bit of experience in the European Parliament working on GMO risk assessment. Everybody remember that? And that was a great campaign that Greens were involved in across Europe, and we had some real demonstrable changes to try and protect us, alongside the precautionary principle, from those kinds of marketisation of our food and agriculture. And that was a great insight offered to me into how Greens could do business in Europe. And that's something which I'd be very interested in continuing. I've also stood in 3 European Parliament elections before now. And I think that wherever I am on the list, I can be demonstrated to be visible and try and push the green agenda wherever we are. And I think that visibility is very important. Now, I know many of us in the room have been deeply dispirited and despairing about what's been happening in New Zealand. Those kind of civil liberties are going to be one of the main planks that Greens will be united on and will forcefully speak upon. And so there was I, many, many times, campaigning as part of the anti-racist movement against Tommy Robinson. And that rise of the far right is something that we need to be very visible and proactive upon. And finally, as has already been mentioned, there is the climate change emergency. We need to do everything that we can as Greens. It's in our DNA to work both locally and internationally. And that's one of the main things we can do if we get somehow the European Parliament back, that I would like to be a driving force behind. So I hope you will consider me. Hopefully you're number one or as high as you can make it. Thank you.
It's going to be really difficult to choose between you all. We've got an amazing, amazing group of candidates. Now, I have 3 questions for this first batch of questions, and our candidates are being given 3 minutes each to answer this first batch of questions, and Phil will do the timer again for you. We're going to be starting from Sam and moving towards Shara, and then starting with Rachel and moving towards Obi. And we are, so if you've all got your pens ready to write down your 3 questions so you can remember what they are. So the first question, if you were selected as the lead candidate, how would you work with local London parties to make the case to remain? Has everyone got that down? Okay. Do you need to say it once more?
Say it once more.
If you were selected as the lead candidate, how would you work with local London parties to make the case to remain? And our second question is, climate change denial is strong in some EU countries and in some EU governments. Will this hamper the EU's ability to deal with climate change? And the third... No, sorry, I'll do that again, sorry.
We're not all as
Assembly members.
Sorry?
We're not all Assembly members at quick at getting the question.
I'll read that second question again. Climate change denial is strong in some EU countries and in some EU governments. Will this hamper the EU's ability to deal with it? And the third question, if elected, would you work across party groups for the extension of trade union rights and the promotion of worker co-ops in the EU, as stated in our own party's Workers' Rights and Employment section in the PFSS? Shall we start that one again? If elected, would you work across party groups for the extension of trade union rights and the promotion of worker co-ops in the EU, as stated in Green Party policy? Yep. If elected, would you work across party groups for the extension of trade union rights and the promotion of worker co-ops in the EU, as stated in Green Party policy? So, it's up to you how you divide up your time. You've got 3 minutes, but it would be great if you could address the 3 questions. So, Sam, for you to start.
So in terms of what I would do to make the case to remain, I want to work with local parties to have discussions about what kind of actions that we could do to promote the case for Remain. So looking at new forms of campaigning such as creative actions, and also connecting with social and environmental movements who see the value of remaining in the European Union and create a discourse where we can truly promote that. But as other candidates have said, we need to be reaching out to people who decided not to vote to remain in the European Union. And we need to be able to create space for that dialogue and work with NGOs and other organisations who are doing that and have those conversations. But also make the case at the same time for what a green vision for Europe can actually do. It's not just good enough to say that we're going to remain, we have to show what we will do if we will remain. And I think the European Green Party has a very strong platform that we need to introduce people to and we need to be speaking loudly and bravely about. In terms of the issue with countries where there is climate change denial, many of you may remember the example of Poland, who at the recent COP decided to invite in coal industry directly into the COP. And they decided to try and shut down activists to be able to actually access the COP talks and participate in protests. We need to be could be put against countries that are not living up to the Paris Agreement that the EU as a whole had agreed to sign. But we also need to be able to do this in a way where we can empower civil society within those countries to make the change. It's not good enough for Western European countries to say to Eastern Europe that this is what you should be doing. We should be working with activists and creating that space for civil society, which has been crushed and minimalised by governments that exist. Finally, in terms of extension of trade union rights and working in coalitions, I totally agree that this is incredibly important. I'm currently a member of the Musicians' Union, and unfortunately there is not a musicians' union spreading across the whole of Europe. We need to be able to work in coalition with, for example, the Socialists and Democrats and the Party of the European Left, who have some roots within the trade union movement for these particular rights. And we also need to be able to work with the European trade union representation that already exists and work out what particular laws that we can define to bring forward. But we also, if elected as MEPs and within the Greens ourselves, need to be making the case for why trade unions are important in labour, and to be able to make the case that as the working world changes and digital technology is now potentially threatening jobs, that actually solidarity can help move and progress answers to these particular problems. And we also need to be promoting things such as universal basic income and why they will be assisting trade unions as well. So that's my answer to those particular questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is Vivian, if you could give your answers to those questions.
Yes, and they are going to be extremely short. You'll be happy to know. If selected as lead candidate for the MEP list, then I would visit each local party to learn about their area and what would work there. So I can't say in advance because I would be learning from each local party. The answer to the second question is yes. Climate change denial in the governments that, sorry, I'll start from the beginning. If EU governments and EU countries are denying climate change, then yes, of course, it will hamper our ability to do anything about it. And again, it's going to be a learning experience what to do. I can't say at the moment. And I would certainly work across party groups in the EU, not only concerning labour union rights and promotion of worker co-ops, because worker co-ops are just brilliant, but also I would be looking at Green Party policy on other issues and working across party groups when necessary on everything, anything. You know, if we're going to move forward, and that's what we have to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now Peter.
To be honest, in terms of fighting the Remain campaign, the first people I'd be talking to are people like Benali and Remco, I think, who were involved strongly, and all the other members were involved in the Remain campaign last time, to find out what lessons we can learn, what didn't work, because that's the important thing to find out, but also what worked well, so we can build on that and make sure we have an effective campaign, the People's Vote campaign. In terms of local party structure, we already have local parties who have really good campaigning organisations. That's why we won more councillors at the last council elections, and hopefully we'll continue to do so. We're also putting in place our campaign for the London Assembly next year, and so it's piggybacking on that, using that and boosting that at the same time to work together as part of our campaigning for Remain. So on all those levels, trying to use the structures and information we've already got and boost that to take that forwards. In terms of other countries' denial in the EU, yes, at the moment, they can block things, they can veto things. That's why the European Green Manifesto, as part of our reforms across the European Union, is we want to introduce changes to that. So that individual countries can't stand in the way of what the majority of people across the EU actually, the action we need to take. So particularly on things like the climate emergency, where we know we've got to act quickly, then we need to take forward that action without it being blocked by these individual countries. As been said, we need the wider work of trying to combat climate denial and make people aware of this. But yes, we also need to reform in the EU so that we can work more quickly and more effectively. Working across party groups, while we are likely to get a lot more Green MEPs, thankfully, at these elections, given current polling, we're not going to be the majority, not anywhere near. So the whole point of the European Union is working collaboratively. We're going to have to work with people across different groups, across different parties, to find common ground, to find areas where we can work together. So in terms of trade union rights, there are a number of other groups within the European Union who are on the left, who we would hope to be supporting that anyway. But we also need to bring people on board by showing why this is good for people all round. The trade unions isn't just an issue of the left, it's about people's rights, it's about human rights, it's about people being able to have a better life, so putting those messages across. So yes, it's part of being an MEP. Good skills should be to be able to work collaboratively across different parties. You can't be tribal, you have to bring other people on board. So I think that's my 3 answers on those.
Thank you very much. Now we'll hear from Gulna.
So my answers, everybody else's answers, including. So what everybody else, just building upon that. I would of course work with local parties, really understand lessons learned from the past and on our Remain campaign, but I would also talk to those who were on the borderline, who were sold lies and chose to leave because they were sold or were told lies that do not exist, and I would unpack those messages, and I would work with local Remain campaigners to change the message. How was the Leave campaign so effective? They blatantly lied, and nobody was questioning. Nobody was questioning, putting out there the simplistic messaging that appealed to so many people. So housing, jobs, refugees, migrants. There was some very awful message. The media, the UKIP party tapped into this frustration with political elites, and I think we as the Greens understand that we have the positive solution. So it's actually working with local parties, bottom up, and Remain campaigners, and those on the border who are looking to make a difference. They want to solve the issues on the ground and to provide hope and that positive message. So yes, that is how I would work with all the other the groups within London. In terms of climate change denial and EU countries, some of them not believing in climate change, I do think maybe the nation state is dead. A lot of the power is in the cities, and you see what is happening is in the cities. I think in the future, I think 75% of the world's population will be in cities. The action on the ground has been happening in the cities, Paris, Amsterdam, London, even in the US. Trump has not stopped what is the action on the ground in cities. So I think by working with cities and C40, the mayors who have made progress, I think we can tackle climate change. I would also work with, I think it's the young Greens and the young. We have to get the young people out to vote, because we have the protests now, we've got this movement, but until we elect Green politicians, be it at a local level, be it at a national level, be it at a European level, at a global level, we are not going to be able to change the structure unless we are in power. And I think capitalising on this movement and this energy and getting the Greens out to vote and the young people out to vote Green would be great. I know I've got 10 seconds left, so of course I will be pushing the trade union rights policies that we as a Green Party stand for, and it's that positive message and putting forward, I need to stop, why one should protect individual rights, individual freedoms and union rights.
Thank you. So the first question is on. Do you want to? Great, thanks. First question is on how we work to make the case for Remain with reference to local parties. Well, I might start by quizzing Zach, who did a very good job of meeting with all the local parties. And I think, as Rachel has said, we need to listen. We've also got some good areas where we can discuss as local parties together to try and work out exactly what our policy should be, or our messaging, with respect to a great number of people who don't agree with Remain. And I have to beg to differ, I'm afraid, with some of what's been said already, is that we can't start that campaign by telling people who voted in a way that we didn't like, that they were lied to, or somehow don't understand what they voted for. There was somebody on Question Time the other day, a fantastic audience participant, who wasn't actually answered. He was furious that what he felt that we weren't going to be delivering on Brexit. And I think we need to make sure we have an answer to them, which will start by admitting that there is something fundamentally non- or anti-democratic about not delivering on that result. And I think as Greens, we can say that at the same time as saying we do need a second opportunity, because with the best will in the world, you probably weren't aware of exactly, I was going to use a swear word at that point, but let's just say an omni-shambles that you were letting yourselves in for. So we must listen, and we must attend to the actual reasons why people felt that they wanted to vote one way rather than another. In terms of climate change denial, well, that is strong, not just amongst some of the European Union member states, but amongst some of the citizens. But we need to work collectively and positively, maybe using a European Citizens Initiative. And if you just see the grassroots appetite there is at the moment, not just, especially amongst the younger generation, putting their elders and our politicians to shame. We don't have any time at all. It's last chance saloon. It's the day before yesterday. We've got no time whatsoever. So we've got to make sure we use all the levers at our disposal, which isn't just democratic politics. It's citizen engagement. And it's the grassroots that are going to say loud and clear across Europe, up with this we cannot put. So we've got to make sure that we circumvent the European leaders if necessary. Finally, in terms of the unions, it's imperative, it's part of our DNA that we actually work collectively to protect the rights, many of those who are being shafted, shall we say, because they aren't able to string enough together to actually live. And even when we talk about 4-day working weeks that we do in the Green Party, let's make sure that that isn't an elitist proposition, because for many people they can't even afford to do that. Jean's done fantastic work on the Working Time Directive. I also work in health service education, and I can see the impact there of us doing good legislation in Europe to try and protect against overwork and overexploitation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we're working our way this way along the panel, so we'll need to move the cameras probably. Rachel Collinson.
So how would I make the case to remain? How would I work with local parties? Well, my modus operandi is, again, to listen. And I've been listening really carefully to people who voted leave, because those are the people that we have to talk to. And those are the people we have to convince. And what I've heard so far is that people are just fed up to the back teeth of Brexit. They want to talk about something else now. And they don't really care how it happens, they just want it to happen sometime. And so we need to talk to that feeling. Well, look, let's just work with what we've got. And we're not ready to leave yet. We haven't figured out all the problems. And we need to remain in order to build a European Union that's less centralised, that listens more to its citizens, that hears our concerns. And we can't do that with the current status quo. So let's remain and let's sort them out, because Greens are so focused on reform of the EU. It's desperately needed, whether we remain, and I believe we will remain, or whether we leave. We can't leave the EU alone. Secondly, what do we do about climate change denial, and can the EU overcome it? Well, I think, again, on this, we have to follow the money. Climate change denial didn't come just out of nowhere. Where does it come from? It comes from big firms like the Koch brothers, like Gazprom in Russia, which is all tied up with the Russian government. If you can cut off funding to those companies, like the Stop Funding Hate campaign has done to combat fascism and the rise of the far right amongst the British press, and actually in the US and the EU as well as sleeping giants, if we can do that, then climate change denial will not have the fuel to burn in terms of perpetuating these fake news and the lies. Once we've done that, we can triumph. The EU can win over those vested interests. So thirdly, the trade union movement is something I believe in very strongly. Not only am I a union member, also some of my clients in my day job are unions. What I know about the trade union movement is it desperately needs to modernise. It's not fit for purpose in our economy, which is increasingly turning towards self-employment and the gig economy. And the fastest growing industries are not unionised. So what we have is we have a desperate need to reform the trade union movement as well. So, of course, I will support trade unions, and especially the cooperative movement, but what we need is something more than that. And that's something, as a self-employed person, I would like to work with other nations to discover.
First question that we were asked is, if you are selected as a lead candidate, how are you going to make the case for remaining together with local parties? Well, if I was selected to be a lead candidate, I would be making the case to go green with local parties until the election, and then continue to make the case for remain. I think it's really important to understand that in the in the field, in the local, in the European elections that we're going to be, we are not going to be the only party that is going to appeal to mostly Remainers in London. There are going to be other parties who will go after the same voters. And I think what's really important is that we demonstrate that Remain is important because of the things that we Greens can achieve in the European Parliament, working together with others. It's what we can do on climate, what we can do on air pollution, and all of those things that make London a better, safer, and cleaner place are things that we have to thank the European Union for over the past decades, and it's what we need to continue to fight for. Climate deniers in Europe. There's a risk here that if we get too involved in trying to stand up to those who continue to deny that climate change exists, that we haven't got enough energy and time to stand up to those who are complacent about climate change. We have signed up as the European Union to the Paris Agreement, and we are implementing the Paris Agreement. This is of great importance, and Greens across Europe are supporting that with every fibre in their bodies. And I think Peter made a very important point about vetoes and about making sure that rogue countries cannot veto any legislation that would stop implementing the climate measures. I think climate complacency at the moment is a bigger threat than climate denial, because we're kind of past that, if you like. The last question, if you were elected, would you work across parties for the extension of trade union rights and the promotion of worker cooperatives in the EU? Yes, of course. Yes, of course, we will work with other parties in the European Parliament. That is what Greens do. That is how Greens have achieved many things. But we will also work with those in Brussels and in Strasbourg who are in the trade union movement and those who represent the worker cooperatives. We're in a moment in time where our economy is transforming at a very fast rate, where things are changing very quickly. Think of the automation of jobs, think of the potential implications of a universal basic income, of the gig economy. So those are things where we want to work together with the trade unions and with people representing worker cooperatives to really get to the bottom of those issues and to make the right policies for them. Thank you.
Okay, Darren, your turn.
Okay, so first question, how would I work with the parties to make the case for Remain? Well, first of all, I wouldn't be so complacent this time. I mean, I think that was one of the things that we all tripped up on, that we didn't realise that we shouldn't take the results for granted. And then I'd take a leaf out of the, obviously, the Green Party's manifesto, which is to hold a mini People's Assembly. We already hold them in Ealing, in the Transition Towns movement, so why not do something similar maybe on a small scale, but get the London parties together to have a little People's Assembly and work out how we should work together. And then there is, of course, the question of the people, the disillusioned people, or the people who feel they were left behind. We should definitely find, as Caroline keeps saying, we should definitely not stomp over their opinions. We should listen to them, and we should work out how we can work with them. And that leads me to my third point on this, is that we've got a great expertise in the party. We're really getting strong at getting our message out, especially over some of the older parties. So I think we should almost feel it our duty to use our elected representatives and our marketing skills to get the message of how great the EU is for us and has been from an environmental point of view. So, question of climate change denial in some countries. I think we were thinking about this quite a lot, because you could say that we've already sort of had we had an issue with fossil fuels in this country, and back in the 80s we had the famous miners' strike and Thatcher. And what we didn't do at that time, we didn't provide a just transition for those workers from a mineral extraction business to a greener life. And so I think that's something that we should have to think about, how we can give a just transition to the coal miners in Poland. They don't know that we're just taking away their livelihood, we're actually thinking really hard about what they can do next to make them left in the dark. And then finally, we've got how do we, worker co-ops and trade union rights are obviously really important, but we're really missing out. But everything, the legislation is moving so slowly, and the digital economy is moving so quickly that we really have to catch up, and we have to try and mobilise the legislation to try and do something. And what we should do, I'm just going to finish. What we should do is we should look to France, we should look to Italy, we should look to the other EU countries, our partners, because they are moving ahead and legislating on that.
To wake you up. Kirsten.
Yes. One of the worst things about being one of the last, you think it's an advantage because you have plenty of time to consider it. And then everybody says all the things that you want to say. So you write it all down, you scribble it all out, and then you write something else down. So you have to bear with me while I pick through my bits here. I perhaps I should rephrase that. So how would you work with local parties? Well, fortunately, of course, it's going to be quite a short campaign. Because it's just 2 months. And we're running a campaign anyway for the London election, so that would be an asset. We already do really well in London, working across parties, so I know a lot of the parties already, a lot of the activists in the parties, which obviously helps. In terms of, I'm with Rachel about listening. I think that is the first thing, is in the areas where we have people who voted to leave, you basically have to say to them, why did you vote the way you voted? Do you feel that now that you have the facts, sufficient facts, to vote when you did? Or do you think we should have another go at it? I think that's the first thing that I would say is really. And then, I mean, London is more than anything. Air pollution speaks for itself. And we've already heard about the Paris Agreement, that we are signed up to within the EU, and air pollution in London is critical now. And I think even the most hardline believers would realise that that is a major problem. The city income, City of London, the banking sector, which is dependent on the EU as much as the EU is dependent on it, and it provides an awful lot of our income. Everybody can see the staffing problems we are now having if we leave the EU, that, a load of our industry, businesses can't staff their premises and so on and so forth. So the facts really to London speak for themselves. And so let's see, climate change denial, I mean, the planet will speak for itself. We've got the Paris Agreement, and people can just look out the bloody window and see the climate is changing. I have very little time to give those people the oxygen of publicity, I have to say. Shop stewards, what do I want to put that? Oh, I was a shop steward, yes. And I am absolutely passionate about also Danish, which we have track record in terms of workers' rights and workers' co-ops. I like the UBI situation because robotics are coming to take over. We need more employee members, ownership. We need workers on boards, all those sorts of things. You basically need to revolutionize the whole of the workers' situation, and the EU is the perfect place for that. So I don't. Can't believe I've got run over my time anyway, so there you are. That's it.
I was hoping to be the one who mentioned basic income, but she did. Okay, how would you work with London local parties? We do actually need more publicity for the EU, and well, we know certain lead MPs and MEPs end up in BBC Question Time, but you know that. certain person that we don't have to mention. For some reason, I mean, because of this the vote of Brexit, that's when people actually started finding out what the EU is actually about and why they exist. Most of them didn't know. Finding out that yes, you have a house in France. Oh, voting for the voting leave actually meant that you're going to be paying capital gains tax. Same thing in British people in Spain as well. So perhaps there will be people who actually would have changed their minds. The ones who are actually just willful will just say no, they don't care. Some people turned around to me and said, okay, I know that leave would be bad for the young people, but I don't care. I prefer to leave. Unfortunately, there are people like that, so we won't be able to talk to them. The ones we can talk to will be the ones who didn't vote. I have to confess, I actually was of 2 months about it. I didn't vote. Sorry. And then afterwards I said, okay, maybe a big mistake, but another case, we shall see. Okay, number 2, climate change now is strong. Okay, City of London banks, subsidies, which I mentioned in my manifesto, was that we give the corporations £93 billion per year subsidies. What do we actually get from it? Something about they don't leave the country. And then, of course, I've noticed in my campaigns certain greenwashing from the banks, like Tower Hamlet Cemetery, who actually gives them a lot of money. Oh, the banks, Barclays, while at the same time they're giving money to the tar sands in Canada. If you've been to Drax, it's supposed to be a great way to fuel our homes, but at the same time it's actually producing a lot more carbon dioxide and pollution in the air. But for some reason it's regarded as a green option. BP or not BP, a few years ago we did Carnival of Dust. It's actually a carnival where we mentioned how I believe there's about 6 big mining companies in corporations based in London that actually are killing native indigenous people when they're actually in their mining companies in other countries. We need to actually tackle that as well. All that stuff. 24 seconds. Sorry. Elected the trade unions and workers' co-ops, I would say, yeah, universal basic income. I've spoken to a few trade union members and they said, yes, they would actually support universal basic income. That would actually be a good way to strengthen unions and people and workers' rights. Yes.
Thank you very much. All of you for doing so brilliantly on the timekeeping, and thank you, Phil, for keeping us all fully up to speed with what is happening on the time front. Now, we're only 5 minutes running late, and given that I have to read 2 statements that weren't in the time scale, we're doing absolutely brilliantly. We are meant to now be having a short comfort break and coming back at 3:40, so the time now is 3:24. So at 3:40, by real time rather than that's 1 minute, 1 minute fast. But 3:40 we will be back again for another round of 3 questions and for the final statements from all our candidates. So that right now you have 15 minutes to mill around and talk to candidates. If anyone, I have got questions for the final 3 questions, but if anyone thinks there is something that is absolutely burningly missing, let me know and I will put it in the mix. But I will discuss it with our, is that ERO leaving?
No, I understand.
Fine. Okay, so back at 3:40. Thank you. Perhaps we should turn off the...
We should, but I don't know how.
Well done.